Our next performer is someone that I knew first from watching YouTube. A fantastic Scottish YouTuber, Bruce Fummey, has a Scottish History Tours channel, and I've learned more watching Bruce on YouTube than I have ever from going to school or studying it even on my own. Bruce is a stand-up comedian. Indeed, he's the former Scottish Comedian of the Year, storyteller, obviously YouTuber with hundreds of thousands of followers. And Bruce will ask what Burns would say if he was around today.
Thank you, Gordon. Before I address the subject of today's speech, I should probably explain why I'm here. Because, to be honest, I didn't have time to be here. Right? I'm here doing AirSup, trying to get organised to go away to Australia and New Zealand to start the first leg of my next tour of my live show, Scotland Made the World, which will be in theatres in Scotland in autumn 2025 and springtime 2026. Tickets at www.brucefummey.co.uk. Thanks for asking. Anyway, in the thick of scurrying about and screaming a new show and trying to get videos ready and all that, at 11:20 on the 6th of December, Gordon McIntyre Kemp got through to me on the phone. I didn't ken, I must have switched off call screening, right? But one way or another, he got through to me. And quick as a flash, he says, "Oh, Gordon, can I put you on hold? I've got a guy here trying to talk to me about PPI insurance." And Gordon says, "Shut it, you fud." Well, I understood that. He says, "This is really important." He says, "The nature's future depends on it." I thought, Jings, Crivens, help my bob. Well, I'm nothing if not a patriot. So I said, "Well, Gordon, let me put my imaginary PPI claims salesman on hold. In fact, I'll tell him I'll call you back." And then I paused for a believable amount of time. And then I said, "Right, Gordon, tell me, what can I do for the nation?" He says, "Well, we're having a Burns event on the 18th of January, and our preferred speaker's not available. I was wondering if you'd come over and talk about what Robert Burns would have thought about Scottish independence today." And I said, "Gordon, have you lost your mind? Robert Burns was born over 270 years ago. When Burns was writing, the Jacobites had just been crushed. Yeah? The clan system was being dismantled. The Edinburgh New Town was being built with street names specifically designed to kowtow to and be subservient to the Hanoverian hegemony. Yeah? And James Watt was building a steam engine to drive the new industrial revolution. Yeah? We live in a post-industrial Scotland where we've got a Scottish devolved parliament. And we've got windmills to try and stall the effects of that industrial revolution." I said, how could a ball bag like me, who's lived through a Scottish independence referendum, have any way of knowing what a lyrical genius like Robert Burns, who could never have imagined one, would think? I said, only a complete idiot whose hubris is only exceeded by his stupidity would have such a batshit crazy sense of his own importance to think that he could give a speech like that. And Gordon says, "So I'll put you down then." I said, "Gordon, you're not listening to me. I'm saying only an idiot would do that." He says, "Aye. But only a complete idiot would stand in front of an audience for 2 minutes with his fingers at his ear, minding a non-existent telephone handset." So I put him on speakerphone. He says, "Bruce, you be in good company. Billy Kay's speaking before you and he's reciting after you." I says, "What? You want me to speak sandwiched between two Billy Kay slots? Are you joking? I look like a complete fanny. He said, but you're used to it. I said, what? He says, you've got experience in public speaking. I says, okay, let's leave aside the fact that I'll be completely out of my depth. The point I'm making is that the anachronism of comparing 18th and 20th century mindsets. Burns was born and lived in the second half of the 18th century. The middle of that century, like when he was born, was the flowering of the Scottish Enlightenment. It was a time when Voltaire said, it's to Scotland that we look for our ideas of civilization. David Hume, Adam Smith, and the ideas of the world were being formed. And yet, thrusting intellectuals and businessmen were taking elocution lessons to lose their Scottish accents. They were calling themselves North Britons, for God's sake. And calling themselves North Britons was just where the slide started. 100 years later, they'd be calling themselves the Gers, the Teddy Bears, the Glasgow Rangers. Always splits a room, I said. I said, in fact, 100 years later, the Wallace Monument would be built by loyal Unionists who promoted William Wallace as a hero of Union. Have you not been watching my videos, Gordon? He said, no, really, but that farmer boy Jim Smith's really funny, isn't he? Yeah. I says, you're no helping. I said, I tell you what Burns did do. When toffs and middle-class social climbers were trying to lose their Scottish accents, he wrote poems chiefly in the Scottish dialect. Now, everyday people were still speaking Scots. There were still people writing in Scots, but he somehow created a bridge that meant that the Scots that were spoken on the Ayrshire farm was acceptable in 18th century Edinburgh drawing rooms. And 100 years after that, during the American Civil War, Ulysses S. Grant would still be reading Burns to his troops. And 100 years after that, could be celebrated in communist Russia. He created a permission structure for the cowering, timorous middle classes that meant that 200 years later, when I was at school, 59 weeks of the year, we were scolded for speaking Scots, and then in some twist of irony, every January we had to compete for a trophy to see who was best at speaking Scots. How screwed up topsy-turvy are we? I says, I ken you're all business for Scotland and all that, but if it's business for Scotland speared in English, what's that getting us? You get what I think Burns would have said? A people express freedom in their own lead, in their own tongue, not on a spreadsheet. I'm saying the terms of reference are different. We live in a Scotland where some people would demand independence whilst throwing away their language, and they would do that to achieve economic advantage. Burns gave up economic advantage in order to capture the songs and heritage of our culture. What's independence if we subordinate our culture to somebody else? What would our concept of independence have meant to Burns when he never, at any point in his life, was eligible to vote? Think about that. Burns was writing at a time where you could fit everyone who imagined Scottish independence in a camper van. And Gordon said, hold on, who's paying for this camper van? I said, you're missing the point, Gordon. Now I wish I'd never mentioned the camper van. He says, you know, you can mention the camper van just so long as it's properly accounted for. I says, forget the camper van. I was just making the point that we're looking from a perspective of 2025. India gained independence from the British Empire in 1947. My dad's homeland, Ghana, gained independence in 1957. The rest of Africa, Asia. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand only keep the king so they can get EastEnders on the telly. We're the last colony. Robert Burns didn't have that perspective. He could only imagine the opportunity that we had and lost and regret to this day. Don't forget that when Burns published poems chiefly in the Scottish dialect, we were still sorting out the consequences of 1776. Oh, said Gordon, the American Revolution. Rebellion, I said, mate, rebellion. Didn't let them get ideas above their station, eh? I know it looks like Biff Tannen found that sports almanac in Back to the Future 2, and he's now the president and wants to buy Greenland, but it was still a rebellion. So was William Wallace a rebel, says Gordon. Oh, no, says I. America were a group of colonies. We were a nation. But now you come to mention Wallace, says I. I remember the first time I realised that we were a nation. That was because of Robert Burns. It was my first ever Burns speaking competition in primary 6, and we all had to learn and recite Burns's interpretation of Bruce's address to the troops at Bannockburn. Scots wha hae wi' Wallace bled, Scots whan Bruce is after led. Welcome to your gory bed, or to victory! Now's the day and now's the hour. See the front of battle or see approach. Proud Edward's power. Chains. Slavery. What would be a traitor knave? What would fill a coward's grave? What say base? It's be a slave. Let him turn and flee. What for Scotland's king and law? Freedom's sword would strongly draw. Freeman stand or freeman fall. Let him follow me. Now, I didn't win that competition. I didn't win the competition. In fact, I got detention for stabbing the English kid next to me. But I think I captured the spirit of the poem. Burns provided inspiration for generations to come. But when he wrote to a friend about Scots wha hae, he said, I'd never thought to give myself trouble in the matter until I visited Bannockburn and stood by that whinstone that commemorated the battlefield. Why would he have thought of it? He knew he would never get the opportunity to vote on it anyway. Think how privileged we are compared to Robert Burns. And Gordon said, are you telling me that there's no way to interpret Burns' attitude to current politics? I said, well, I actually recently bought a book by Paul Mulgrady that kind of tries to do that. It's called Robert Burns and Scottish Cultural Politics. And what did it say? Said Gordon. I said, well, I can't go through all the new, but broadly it said, big word, 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 even bigger word, big word, big word, big word, Devomax. And he says, well, you can't say that. I says, all right, if I say, because a few wee words, and then freedom. He says, aye, you can do that. He says, one more thing. He says, do you think you could make it funny? I says, no. How long do you want me to speak for? He says, oh, about 10 minutes. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Gordon McIntyre Kemp for his introduction. And let me say that for a guy like me from rural Perthshire to come down to Glasgow, to an incredible place like this, to a fantastic audience like this, with other people, it's not only a privilege, it's a fucking inconvenience, to be honest with you. So turning to the subject matter in hand, I've run out of time. Thank you for your attention. I've been British Humility. Pass you back to Gordon McIntyre Kemp. Thank you.